Je m'appelle Darryl Levine, je suis membre du personnel de la ville de Côte Saint-Luc et je serai le modérateur pour la réunion de ce soir sur le plan d'urbanisme. Cette réunion est prévue pour 90 minutes. This information meeting on the master plan and zoning bylaw amendments focusing on the Caldwell Kildare area is taking place on January 29, 2025 using the Zoom video conference platform. In front of you, you see the Associate City Manager responsible for the urban plan, Tanya Abramovich. You have Councillor Lior Azarad, Councillor Sydney Benizri, and Charles Senecal, the Director of Urban Planning, which includes engineering. I'm sorry, the Director of Urban Development, which includes urban planning as well as engineering. The way this is going to work this evening is there'll be some presentations and some discussion in front of you. And when you have a question, you can press on the Q&A button on your Zoom app, and you can type your question. I'll be reading the questions and asking the panelists to answer them as the evening goes on. So that's about it. I will ask Tanya, yes, to, nope.
Councillor
Azarad and Benizri to make some opening remarks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Darryl. So, bonsoir, good evening, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à la séance d'information sur le plan d'urbanisme et le secteur Caldwell Kildare. Cette session est informative. C'est pour vous présenter le projet, le futur projet sur Caldwell et Kildare. Nous tenons ce soir, au niveau du format, nous allons vous informer du projet et par la suite, nous allons pouvoir répondre à vos questions. Comme l'a mentionné Monsieur Darryl Levine, vous pourrez poser vos questions sur le chat et on va s'assurer d'y répondre. Sans plus tarder, j'aimerais passer la parole à mon collègue Lior Azarad, conseiller du district 6. Alors, je vous souhaite une bonne soirée.
Merci Sydney, conseiller Benizri. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd like to thank Tanya and Charles for preparing this information session, as well as many of the other sessions, pre-consultations, consultations. And just to give everybody an idea, this is been in the making for over 5 years. So it's not something that's just been popping up in the last minute or so. So it's just one of the many sessions to inform all the residents. This one's very specific to our district, in District 6, but since we're very close to Sydney's district, obviously he's involved very closely for his residents, right across the street from the Caldwell potential development. So this is for zoning purposes only. I'd like to also thank Darryl Levine for taking care of all the technical preparations for tonight, as well as managing all the questions. And I'll pass the baton over now to Tanya with a small presentation to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Azarad, and also Councillor Benizri. So I thought what I would do is just do a brief, very brief presentation, teeny, tiny, so that people could sort of be oriented as to what it is we're doing. I don't know if in Zoom, the slideshow mode, can you see in slideshow mode? Slideshow from beginning. Okay, it's very short. Okay, so when we're talking about Caldwell Kildare, this is the area. So this is Caldwell over here. We've got Einstein over here, and this is Kildare, even though it's hard to see because it's the back of the home. So this is literally only area we're really talking about tonight, but it's because this is in the heart of a certain part of Côte Saint-Luc, really central Côte Saint-Luc. We wanted to have this session so that people can hear specifically about this one. So you move it over. Okay. The context for this is the planning program, le plan d'urbanisme. This is a planning document that really lays out, we have one once a generation. The one that's en vigueur at the moment is from the borough years of 2004. So it's time to upgrade. And what this is a planning document that literally lays out the vision and the long-range plan. It's not a plan where things happen tomorrow. It's a plan where things unfold over many years, sometimes decades, that lays out the vision for where, in this case, this council wants the city to go. In order to lead up to this point, we didn't just make a document. We had a year of pre-consultations with the public where we questioned them. What did they want? What is their vision? We had a survey, 1,500 people responded. District 6, if I'm just gonna break it down, District 6, 15% of the respondents were from District 6, 11% were from District 7. So the districts were well represented in that survey. We had workshops, we had all sorts of things. And then we took a year and a half to draft it. Puis après ça, on a recommencé, repartir les discussions avec le public. On avait une séance d'information en septembre. Il y avait une petite présentation de tous les règlements d'urbanisme le 20 novembre. Et ensuite, on avait une série de consultations avec District 8, District 3, District 1. Alors, voici ce soir, voilà, on est rendu District 6 and 7, this particular area, because there's a change. So the zone we're talking about, because the real important part of this is related to zoning and less so the master plan part. On the left, you'll see the current zone Z, I should say. So if you see Kildare, you'll see in the red square, what we're talking about tonight are CD7, that's commercial 7, commercial 8, and IR 16, which is where the MICFA is at the moment. So in the new plan, in the new zoning, apart from the fact that we've really changed the numérotation of, and in some cases, the actual geography, this area with these 3 zones is now being merged into one zone called number 612, zone 612. So in this zone 612, it's just an amalgamation of the 3. And what that is tied to is this thing called the tables of uses and norms, la grille des usages et normes. And this just lays out what you can do in the zone. It lays it out in terms of use. So what we're doing, I'll give you the grosso modo, because this is impossible to read. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. It tells you the heights, it tells you the setbacks, it tells you the uses, and it gives little details. So what are the changes on this lot? So first of all, as I said, we're merging the 3. Then we're adding residential use in a mixed use way, which means that we're adding residential use, but not on its own. There can't be a residential building that's just residential. It has to have commercial, at least on the ground floor. So you can have residential, but it's not standalone. So if you're looking at it, it's 1 or 2 stories are zoned behind Einstein, and then 2 or 3 stories on Kildare, 6 to 8 along Caldwell. So it's not just like a big block of exactly the same thing. There's a gradation that would go upward in terms of zoning. So short, where it's surrounded by short, so that when you're on Einstein, you're not going to have like, giant height behind you. Not that there's giant height at all. And then the other thing is the current uses are still permitted and in fact desirable, right? So commercial, we don't want to get rid of the commercial in this area. We like the commercial in this area. It's important for the service de proximité that you have your banks and your clinics and your daycares and all that. In addition to the institutional, apart from the MICFA, there's a lot of religious institutions in this area. This is the heart of what we'll call the Orthodox community in Côte Saint-Luc. We are in the vision of the city. This sort of area is really the heart of the commercial and institutional for it, so that could service it. So we wanted to maintain that. And I just want to emphasize the point that everything I'm talking about, every report, every document, every previous session, if you go on cotesaintluc.org/engage, cotesaintluc.org contribuer, you can access all of it. So it's all available for you to read and look at. I just wanted to give you a grosso modo of what we're talking about tonight. So when there are questions from you or from the counselors in this chat, we can be oriented. Merci.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with one just general question, Tanya. I know that you gave over a review of what was done. I just wanted to explain quickly, because I know you went through the zoning, but I want you to explain a little bit more how what the changes are. I saw that you mentioned them. I'd like you to go a bit more into detail about the differences from what we have now to where the city's going in terms of zoning.
Mute. Yes, I am. Okay, so let me just, I'm trying to figure out the best way to geographically show you, because it's not like I have a project or something to explain. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my presentation, because it's actually easier for me to show you from the cover of it. So let me just do that. So I'm going to just go back to my slideshow, because it makes it bigger. Did it do it? No. Okay, let me go back to the front. Okay, so this is the way I'm going to explain it. And you have to picture it. Like, picture it, Caldwell, Kildare, 20 year. I don't know. So this part, I don't know if you can see my cursor. The Caldwell buildings are not part of this zone. So they exist, but they're not really part of it. So what you'll see is so there's Einstein. And what we did is that in the zone, so we're able to add residential use. So, but it has to be on top of commerce, just so we maintain the service de proximité in the neighborhood. So on the right side, that is behind Einstein, for the first, I think it's 30 meters. Let me just double check that so I don't tell untruths. Yes, so 30 meters from the property line, it's 1 to 2 stories. So it stays short, right? And 30 meters is a lot. It's like 90 feet. So the first 90 feet from the property line behind the Einstein homes cannot be more than 2 stories. Then on the Kildare side,
So I just want to make sure we're clear. So the 30 meters we're talking are on the side, if we're looking at the image, on the right side where the flat building, the medical center is right now.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the side that would go no higher than 1 or 2 stories.
For the first 30 meters.
For the first 30 meters, okay, perfect.
And there's a 9-meter setback as part of that. So you can't even have any building for the first 9 meters from the property line of the people on the Einstein side.
Basically giving like a backyard where 2 homes would have backyards towards each other.
Yes. And then the building starts, but it still has to be short for 60 meters or 60, well, 90, like 30 minus 9. So then on Kildare, I'll just sort of go around the bend. So here, which it's hard to see the street because it's covered by the homes in front of it, but the front, it can only be a maximum. So first of all, for the first 30 meters from Kildare, it also can only be 2 to 3 stories. So slightly higher than the ones on Einstein, but still in scale with the houses across the street on Kildare, right? So when you're walking down Kildare, you're walking down the street, it feels the vibe. It's the same sort of height. And then on the other side, so on the Caldwell side, this one can be 6 to 8 on the street. So it's slightly higher, but I'll show you when you look at the view, because I took for this presentation, I'll show you like all sorts of different views. You can see how it actually works on this side because of what you see. But then, and then in the middle, you can go up to 10. So if there was like a thing over here, it could be up to 10, but you can't have 10 here and you can't have 10 here and you can't have 10 on the side either. So it sort of goes up, I want to say in the middle, but it's related to the things on the side. And that's from a height point of view, that's what we've got. Does that, do you think everybody could?
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a recap in French because I know there's some people that, so on va juste expliquer rapidement.
Oui.
Sur le côté droit de l'image, où il y a le centre médical, il faut prendre 9 mètres de la ligne d'où commence le terrain, et on ne peut pas construire pour les premiers 9 mètres. Après ça, pour les premiers 30 mètres, il y a un maximum d'auteur de 1 ou 2 étages. Ça,
incluant les 9 mètres, juste pour clarifier.
Parfait, merci.
Oui.
Maintenant, du côté de Kildare, il y a aussi un 9 mètres qui est ouvert à
Le marge de
Kildare.
recul sur Kildare est 6 mètres.
Ah, pardon, 6 mètres.
Oui.
Et encore une fois, il y a un maximum
Ouais.
d'auteur de combien d'étages sur
2
Kildare?
à
2
3.
étages, 2 à
2
3.
à 3, oui.
Et le côté de Caldwell, on répète la même chose, mais cette fois-ci avec une hauteur de
6 à 8.
6 à 8. Alors,
Oui.
là où la hauteur peut monter plus entre 8 et 10, c'est au centre qui serait parallèle plus au centre Kildare qui a présentement maintenant aux immeubles de centre Kildare.
Ici.
Alors, ça nous donne un peu plus de centrage pour la hauteur, pour moins déranger les voisins autour.
Oui.
Sydney, est-ce qu'il y avait quelque chose
Ouais.
que tu voulais rajouter à ça?
Non, je pense que c'est clair. Bon, on verra les questions, mais j'aimerais peut-être, Tania, j'ai une question et vous pouvez répondre en français ou en anglais. À savoir, ça va faire partie du master plan,
Oui.
et quelle est la démarche à suivre ou le processus pour le développeur? Admettons, bon, il y a une fois que c'est dans le c'est que ça passe, qu'il y a des changements de zonage qui sont en train de se faire. euh, comment le développeur procède et comment à un moment donné les résidents ont droit d'avoir un peu plus d'informations sur ce projet ou ont un droit de regard sur ce projet,
OK. Voulez-vous que j'arrête de partager mon écran? Ou...
si vous voulez.
OK, parce que tout le monde est petit. OK, alors je vais le dire en français et en anglais parce que c'est assez important. Parce qu'il y a deux échéanciers, en fait. Il y a l'échéancier du processus du plan d'urbanisme, et ça, c'est vraiment les résidents. Et il y a aussi le processus pour les promoteurs. Alors, je vais donner les deux. D'abord, pour les résidents. So just to say, there's two timelines that I'm going to answer question about. One of them is the timeline for residents. So what are the next steps in terms of this process? And then the next one is what are the next steps in terms of developers and a project and what would happen. So pour l'échéancier pour les résidents, nous sommes en processus de consultation. Ensuite, je vais produire un rapport basé sur tous les commentaires de toutes les consultations qui étaient faits après la présentation et de première adoption des règlements de zonage et le plan d'urbanisme. Ensuite, il y a une période, je vais le présenter au conseil et le conseil va délibérer, discuter, est-ce qu'on va faire des changements ici ou là ou non. Après ça, il y a l'adoption finale qui est suivie par 4 jours de registre. Ensuite, il y a ça pourra que ça tombe en référendum, c'est possible. Et s'il y a un référendum, il y a tout un processus légal à suivre. Et s'il n'y a pas un référendum, c'est adopté et on fait notre concordance avec l'agglomération de Montréal. So for the residents, the next step is that I write a report based on all the feedback from the consultation since we did the adoption of the draft of the bylaws and the master plan. Then council has a deliberation period where they discuss if there are changes based on the consultations if they want to make. So it's not cast in stone yet. Then we adopt it. Well, you adopt it, I should say. I don't adopt anything. It's a council that adopts the final version, which is followed by an automatic 4-day registration period. And then after that, it could trigger a referendum depending on the numbers. And then if the numbers aren't achieved, then it's just considered adopted and it goes to the agglomeration for concordance. So that's the process. C'est le processus pour les résidents. Pour les promoteurs, so right now, the developers, well, the owners, I should say, they're not just developers in the wings, they're owners. We spoke to them and told them we were modifying the zoning. This is one case where they didn't come to us with a project and we're looking at it. The city sort of said, okay, you own this. We met with the mikvah, we met with everybody in that area who owns the property. Then we sort of said, okay, we're thinking of changing this. This is what we're thinking, our vision. We have, there's a community element, there's commercial, we want residential. And so they've been mulling over, possibilities based on what we've said without having seen the zoning, right? So they are thinking about a project, but couldn't do a thing until we have our zoning presented. So what they would do is, now that they have the zoning, they have to wait for the adoption. C'est l'adoption finale. Nothing can be submitted because council can change their minds about any of the aspects. So assuming it's adopted, then they have to do potentially subdivision, which is a process that goes through the Planning Advisory Committee. They would have to submit proposals, which would also have to go through the Planning Advisory Committee. Councillor Azarad sits on it. He knows how long or short this process can be. And of course, because it would be, there would be, a sign posted on the territory. This is what, is being proposed. And of course, council has to approve it in public anyway. So that is the process, but there's subdivision, it has to be approved. They have to submit landscaping plans. It's not just, oh, tomorrow there's an adoption. So there is no project waiting in the wings like that, but that's the process. Alors en français, pour les promoteurs, d'abord, il faut qu'ils attendent qu'on ait une adoption finale du projet des règlements du zonage, parce qu'ils ne peuvent rien faire et soumettre sans ça. Ensuite, il faut qu'ils vont faire des subdivisions ou non. C'est une demande qu'on fait du gouvernement, c'est vrai, ça prend du temps. Ensuite, il faut soumettre un projet ou avec des plans pour le CCU, le comité du CCU, qui évalue toutes sortes de projets. Puis ça peut prendre du temps. Et ils font des recommandations au conseil qui vote dessus en public. Lorsqu'un plan sera adopté, il y a toujours le processus pour les permis et ça prend du temps aussi. Et après, on va publier, mais aussi avoir une pancarte sur le site décrivant qu'est-ce qui se passe, et ils peuvent donner n'importe quoi à leur élu, de dire, oh non, je n'aime pas ça, blablabla, et même au réunion de conseil. Alors, c'est pas comme ça que ça arrive. It's very slow, but we can't even do anything until it's been adopted, so.
Tanya, we have a question from the audience.
Sure.
I'm just going to go ahead and share the screen here. The question is just to clarify something you said
Sure.
earlier about the heights.
Mm-hmm.
So here is Caldwell.
Yep.
Here is Kahila, yes. And we
Yes.
talked about there's a certain distance that you can't build
Yes.
a lot of height in the backyard of the neighbors. The height will only
Correct.
come, I guess, more towards the middle, let's say. But the question is, what about the height behind Kahila? How would that work?
So in theory, the highest anything could go is 10 stories on the site. But because you can't have the 10 stories on any of the surrounding sides, the only place to have up to 10 stories would be towards the middle in the backish.
Would you say that the distance between the backyards of these folks and the Kahila, is that approximately the same kind of distance that you talked about earlier for the
Not
story?
exactly. The 30 meters is a bit longer than from the Einstein,
It's
let's say,
closer to,
property line. There, it's longer. You've got it at an angle here where it's hard to show you, but the 30 meters goes.
closer to the Caldwell residences.
No. The
Pushes
30
in.
meters, let's say, would go into part of the Kahila building. Wow, where'd you go?
Meaning it doesn't start as close.
It doesn't start as close. Yes, that's the
what
bottom
I'm trying
line.
to say. It's
He
closer
says in a
to
complicated way.
Yeah. The starting point is closer to the halfway point of Kahila, meaning the new building would be further than Kahila is. So it's closer
Correct.
to Caldwell than it is to Einstein.
Well, the building, the higher part of the building, the lower part of the building could be 9 meters, but it can only be up to 2 floors. At 9 meters, it could be 2 floors. To go any higher than that, you got to go all the way to the 30. Is that clear?
I hope that is clear for the questioner. If you have more questions on the specific details, feel free to ask it another question or If anyone has another question
Okay.
on this or anything else, you can go ahead and type it in the Q&A.
I'm just going to also remind everyone attending that sometimes questions will come up to tomorrow or pop up another time. Feel free to reach out to either myself, to Sydney, or to the city directly, and we'll make sure that Tanya and Charles get an answer to you right away. So it doesn't necessarily have to come right now, the question, because it might not pop up into your mind right now. Things hit us up later. So don't hesitate to reach out to us even afterwards.
And if you're going to email consultation@cotesaintluc.org, because that goes to all of us. And it also is everything that's in the consultation email gets put in the consultation report. So consultation@cotesaintluc.org.
We have
No
another
S.
question. We have another question. And this is about the timeline and the process.
Mhm.
I know you said that a master plan can take 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Mhm.
But for this particular project, what is the city's best guess of the fastest that a project of this scale, which isn't as big as perhaps some of the other areas of the city we've been looking at, what's a reasonable guess for when this might happen if the master plan's adopted this year and so forth, and the developers have plans and so on?
Charles, what do you think?
I would say the most optimistic, shortest amount of time from when the new zoning regulations are adopted is 3 years from start to finish. That's the fastest. So that's, the applications through the CCU prior to building permit, and then at least 2 years worth of construction, I would say, for a site this size. So that's the most optimistic amount of time from start to finish.
And when you say optimistic, Charles, you mean the CCU is like, wow, this is amazing. It's all approved with no modification, which has never happened in the history of PAC, especially not for buildings, right? Like,
This is true. However, as part of this process that we've undertaken as a department, we've put together some architectural guidelines that hopefully will, let's say, guide property owners, developers into, producing schematics and plans that, may sail through slightly faster through our PAC and CCU committee than at times other projects like you're referring to. So yeah, it's a very optimistic timeline, but nothing faster than that.
so I would like to just say, Charles made me think of something so people know. So we're talking about the zoning bylaw. We're talking about the master plan. One of the, for me, the most critical bylaws that's being passed, un règlement de PIIA, which is in English SPAIP, Site Planning and Architectural Integration. Those guidelines that Director Senecal mentioned are not just guidelines, they are in fact in this bylaw now. And we have some for all the multifamily buildings. We had them for low rise before, and now we have them for all the buildings, and how they're designed, what they look like, architectural quality, materials that are acceptable. You can't make boxes anymore, just straight boxes. We're not letting them be built in Côte Saint-Luc anymore. So it's really, it's a very visual document. If you go on cotesaintluc.org/engage, you can find it and look through it, because this is the kind of thing that we're aiming for. There's a lot of not attractive architecture in Côte Saint-Luc, and we don't want it anymore. So
just to follow up on the last question about the timeline, you may have answered this, but just to be clear for the audience, the start date, the approximate start date would be not the end date. The end date could be, could take a certain amount of time to do the project, but when do we think is the earliest start date that could be? You're on mute.
When you say start, do you mean a shovel in the ground? That's
Sure.
construction? Oh, I would say no sooner than, approximately a year after the city has not only adopted its new regulations, but once we've received the okay from Montreal and they're approved, then I'd say no sooner than 12 months after that.
So doing the math, what does that take us to?
Well, I would say at this point, again, it depends when the city adopts these new regulations. If hypothetically that was to occur midway through this year, then I'd say, potentially end of summer next year, there could be a shovel in the ground for potentially a phase one, depending on how the owners see this project being phased, etc. Right now, we haven't received or we've seen any potential projects for this site, so it's difficult to say, but definitely nothing within a year, in my opinion, of adoption.
We have another question. It's a bit unclear, so if this isn't quite your question, then go ahead and you can re-ask the question in the Q&A. Can you speak about the mikvah? I know you mentioned it at the beginning.
Mhm.
What would the future of that be if this area is redeveloped? How does that work?
So, so first of all, there's the mikvah, and then there's the mikvah expansion that they just did, right? So it's the zoning allows it to be there. It allows it to be modified. It allows it to be integrated in a future project from depending on whatever would be negotiated with developers. Like the desire of both council, the community, the owners is that the mikvah stays as a community service. Like no one's destroying the mikvah. Let us be clear about that. But could it evolve? Could it be like this? It's all possible given the zoning, but it really would depend on internal discussions between the mikvah as owners and the owners of the rest of the lots. But nobody's getting rid of the mikvah, if that's the underlying question.
Daryl, if I could just jump in, just to add some more clarity there. I know that there was also a question, I have a note here, regarding the other religious institutions. They wanted to know what happens to them. So if you want to just quickly talk about the existing zoning and how it's continuing.
So as I mentioned earlier,
sorry, Tanya, maybe in the same token, if you can, I know that you mentioned it about maybe just to describe again the kind of business that we're gonna have, on Caldwell, like the commercial, the medical, we're talking about the, the medical building. If you can just maybe give us also touch based about this. Services. Thank you.
So what is permitted in terms of use, à part des résidentiels, qui on s'entend est là. So there's residential, there is proximity commerce, which is banks, fruit stores, grocery stores, cleaners, hairdressers, all of these sont tous permis. Donc, tous les usages qui sont permis maintenant, including medical, personal and professional services, all of this is still permitted on the site. So whatever, ce qui existe là est toujours permis. There's also it's very badly named, and I think we're going to rename it meal service and alcohol. So there's no full-on restaurants, like full restaurant service. That doesn't really suit the area, but you can certainly sell food, and we permit like small, like you can pick up, like the bagels, for example. Ça va toujours continuer. Alors ça, c'est permis. Why it's called that, we have to change the title. L'autre chose qui est permis, c'est educational and community establishments. Donc, ça veut dire des institutions religieuses, synagogues, things like mikvahs, and also community centers, d'une sorte ou une autre. So if the synagogues that are there, so the vision of council, first of all, includes these synagogues, right? We know there's a need. We know there are a few of them there in that area. They are well situated for where the congregants who go there live. So the vision of the city is certainly that they continue operation. In the logistical construction way, we would have to figure out, probably in a Tetris-like fashion, how to ensure they continue their, I'll call them operations, while something else would go on. Like, I don't know, because we have no project and we have no phasing of a project and we have no nothing, c'est difficile de dire, on va faire ça et ça. C'est des discussions avec les promoteurs, les institutions religieuses et la ville de comment on peut gérer tout ça ensemble pour assurer la continuité des services in commercial and religious terms.
Tanya, I had a question just to give context for some people in terms of heights. The Caldwell residences, how many stories is that right now? Just to give people an idea what we're comparing.
Oh, let me just, you know what, I'm going to be
Sorry, I threw it at
ridiculous and
call.
count. I'm going to count because off the top of my head, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think they're 11 or 12.
Okay, so we are going below
Yes.
the maximum that's there already,
Mhm.
and we're not allowing it on the perimeter of the lots, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. I just want to just to clarify, you know, that
Mhm.
Do we have other questions?
Just to clarify what you said about the synagogues at that location,
Mhm.
if the area is going to be zoned for that purpose,
Mhm.
then it's up to the synagogues and the owners of the property to reach a rental agreement and so forth to have it or not have it. It's up to
Correct.
those folks. Okay.
So for the city, it's all permitted. You can do it. It's just how that's gone about. You know, that is something that we won't control.
So in terms of the number of people who could attend, so the amount of space allocated, that's again, I think you just answered the question. If the city's permitting the use, then it's up to the owner of the commercial or institutional space to rent out the appropriate size to the congregation.
Yep. Indeed.
so
Yes.
I'm getting what I'm getting from the questions, and I'm gonna ask whoever's asking, feel free to reach out to Sydney or myself. My understanding is that they have a bit of a concern that, you know, I'll take an example of, let's say, in the residential side, you know, they have like renovictions where they sort of do renovations to try to get people out by either increasing the costs or things like that. So that seems to be a concern with some of the people in the commercial sides, whether it's institutional or not. So what could the city do to appease them with those concerns?
So this is I want to say a story that repeats in every single potential demolition of a commercial space, right? It's the same problem in every mall that we're, you know, slated for redevelopment. And certainly the wish of the city is to not lose a drop of the commerce, right? Or the services that go with it. So what would have to happen is that, and it's not, part of this goes with building permit, and part of it is just like, okay, how can we want to say work this out together, right? Which is, if you're building, like, you may have to move tenants over here to demolish this part and build, like, there's it's not as vast a space because there's no giant parking lot that you can build something over here and then demolish that piece after, right? Like at Takari Square, or, you know, the Kelsey Cavendish, or even the Côte Saint-Luc Shopping Center. They can build and then demolish after. So this is a little more tricky, but I don't see it as impossible. It's not a teeny tiny site. It just requires, I want to say, logistics, but we don't want the services disappearing, even temporarily, is not helpful for the neighborhood, right? People use these comments as Caldwell provisions. There's the bagel shop, like this. They would have to move or Tetris around.
Just to answer the next question, it's related to what we're talking about. So can the developer or the owner of the commercial or institutional property decide not to have religious institutions? I guess, Tanya, would say the answer is, I suppose yes, but it's by mutual agreement. They have to agree to a tenant, whoever the tenant happens to be, and the city is giving the zoning to allow for that use, for that religious use. And that's the most I imagine that the city can do, because the city can't force a mall to take a particular tenant or a particular store or particular anything. The city can just set the guidelines of what's allowed as a way to nudge what we, the city, think would be a positive social development or
So-
social use of the space.
You are correct in that from a teeth point of view, we put it in the zoning, right? But we can't mandate that you have the thing in the zoning. So it can flourish. On the flip side of that, certainly we've spoken to the developer, and from every conversation we've ever had with him, the intention has not been to, I mean, he is the one renting to all these people. Their desire is not to eliminate it, right? Like that's not any impression that I have gotten from them. And certainly they have been told very clearly that that is not the wish of the city at all. The city wants this to be sort of an area where these institutions can thrive. That has been made very clear.
So just to add to that, Tanya, I would imagine that when plans are going to be created and
Mhm.
put forth to the city expects to see plans
Of
which
course.
show the capability of housing the existing commerce and institutional and daycares and everything that is being carried in right now. So that's the goal. I mean, we have one of the things I think that Tanya mentioned early on is this is the vision. So the city is putting forward a vision
Mhm.
here for what we think is best for the community. So this is to give the developers an idea of what will be accepted and where we want to go. So that's just to help. But again, legally, just like they don't have to rent now, we can't force them to rent to anyone or not rent to somebody. So we can't force it. As far as I know, I'm not a lawyer, but that's the the gist of where we can go right now.
No, but the city, and I don't know if you were on PAC when we had this happen. So there was a building that had commercial on the ground floor, and the owners of the building wanted to make it purely residential. And at the planning advisory committee and at the council level, it was no, we can't just have it be residential. This is an important corner. We want to make sure that there's still commercial on the ground floor here. And yes, we forced them to keep some commercial on the ground floor. The plans weren't going to be approved until they showed in the plans, because the planning advisory committee, just for those who don't know, because why would anyone? It's half of the committee is filled with, well, there's elected officials, but there are also local architects. So people who are Côte Saint-Luc residents, but who also practice in their work lives as architects. And so plans have to be submitted, full architectural drawings have to be submitted with renderings, with all sorts of things. And the architects look at these and they look at them for technical reasons, like how is this possible? This overhang doesn't make sense. The windows aren't balanced, whatever architectural features. But then the reason why there's also counselors on this committee is because they look and say, whoa, there's supposed to be this, put it back, right? And so, and then this whole thing goes to council to sort of have the stamp and then get voted on. But there have been interventions before, let us just say.
Few more questions. First one, is the space that the two shopping strip malls or shopping places, is it the same developer who would develop the whole site?
I believe it's the same owner for both of them, if I'm not mistaken. Charles, do you know if it is or isn't?
No, I don't know.
I feel like it's the same owner, but I'm not 100% sure.
For the two developments?
The
two-
two commercial parts.
Yeah, my understanding is it is.
Okay.
At the master plan consultation, Tanya, I know you spoke about I don't know what the correct term is, reduced cost housing, social housing.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that issue in general in the master plan, and then maybe focus on, will this site have that type of housing?
Okay, so this is for the city at large. We passed a bylaw for social, affordable, and family housing. And in that bylaw, for the 3 big mall redevelopment sites, so not this site, but the 3 big ones, we require, in order to get a building permit, that a certain proportion of land has to be ceded well, to the city, but ultimately to an organization that will make social or affordable housing. That is not a requirement for this site, but part of that bylaw deals with family housing. And in that, citywide, no matter what multifamily building is built, there is a requirement that 10% of the housing be family housing, which means it's a certain square footage that I can't remember off the top of my head, but it has to have 3 bedrooms. So 10% of any multifamily building that's built in anywhere in Côte Saint-Luc has to be family housing, but the social affordable part of it is really a requirement for the 3 big mall sites and not this one. I mean, there's Kahila right there. It's not like there isn't any in the area. It's just not for this site.
And obviously, we don't know in advance what rental prices would be, if it would be a condo. We don't know any of that. All we know is the
That's
heights.
market.
That's what we set. We set the heights and other rules like that, right?
Yeah, so the city in general, and this is for any site, this one and others, the city says it's zoned multifamily. So whether it turns into a condo or apartments, that's the market and the owners who decide that. There's no, we don't get to choose or regulate that.
We have another question about what you mentioned before about a community center. Yes, I mean, the city would. Well, can you talk about what the city's vision is for that, and how it relates to developers and what could be there?
So to be clear, there is no, I want to say, municipal initiative to build a municipally run facility there. Okay, so if that's an impression I have given, it is not the case. We don't own land there. We're not building a community center. So when we say a community center it could be zoned that way, I'll just give you an example. So once upon a time in Côte Saint-Luc, we had a YMHA, right, which is where Hebrew Academy is now, which had, I want to say, it had a pool, it had whatever Ys have, but ultimately it was demolished and Hebrew Academy was built. The community in Côte Saint-Luc has evolved. There are certainly needs for that kind of facility, right? With you know, separate swimming and all sorts of things. Now the city is not building it, but if you know, the owners wanted to build that kind of facility for the community, then that is permitted. Like that is a use that is permitted. So it's not just a religious space, it's a community space also in the zoning that's allowed.
Une autre question, avec le nouveau développement, comment allez-vous gérer le stationnement pendant et après la construction, et aussi les inconvénients pour la construction, de la construction pour les résidents?
Je pense que je vais laisser le directeur syndical répondre parce que c'est vraiment son service qui va gérer ça.
Répète la question, s'il vous plaît, Daryl.
Alors, pendant la construction, comment est-ce qu'on va gérer le stationnement? J'imagine des résidents alentours, peut-être. Et aussi, comment est-ce qu'on va gérer les inconvénients pour pendant la construction, avec le bruit et tout ça?
En termes de stationnement, je n'ai aucune idée pour l'instant. Quand vous avez reçu peut-être un proposal pour un projet, c'est une des choses pour vérifier avec mon département d'ingénierie. Puis pour le reste, la deuxième partie des questions, c'est concernant la nuisance.
Les nuisances de construction.
OK, oui. OK. Nous avons 3 inspecteurs du bâtiment, puis une des rôles principaux des 3 inspecteurs, c'est vraiment pour suivre la poussière, toutes les choses en termes de sécurité, mesurer le bruit, etc. Alors, oui, c'est notre rôle, département de management bien, pendant la construction. C'est ça.
We have bylaws that govern what construction sites can look like, when they can work, the hours, the dust, and when urban planning is not on duty, public security is. So it's covered.
Well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. As Tanya mentioned, you can at any time send an email to consultation@cotesaintluc.org, and we will get back to you. You can also, I think, contact the city councilors who have encouraged you to contact them with your concerns if you have concerns or questions. I'll give folks another moment or so to ask or to type in their questions, but maybe to begin wrapping it up, Tanya, Charles, Councillor Ben-Isri, Councillor Azarad, do you want to maybe have some concluding thoughts?
I just have a quick note, Daryl. I guess you are going to make this available also on the Engage site as well as all the other ones, so that if anybody who wasn't able to make it tonight will be able to see it and maybe draw some other questions from there.
That's right. It'll be uploaded to YouTube and it'll be embedded or listed on the site tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
Bon. Moi, j'aimerais juste prendre, si on n'a pas d'autres questions, je vois que la session tire à sa fin. J'aimerais vraiment remercier toute l'équipe professionnelle ce soir. Tania Abramovic, directeur général associé pour sa présentation. Charles Sénécal, directeur de développement et d'urbanisme. Et Daryl Levin, directeur des affaires publiques et communication, pour avoir été parmi nous ce soir et d'avoir pris le temps d'être avec nous ce soir. Alors vraiment, merci beaucoup. Et j'aimerais aussi remercier mon collègue Lior Azerad, conseiller du district 6. Et comme on vous l'a mentionné, nous sommes disponibles si vous avez des questions ou n'hésitez pas à nous contacter. Merci encore et une bonne soirée à tous.
So just a quick thing, I think, Daryl, we have one more question. And I won't repeat everything Sydney said because I'm sure everybody understood. I'm not going to say it in English, but it was, for me, having gone through this master plan, feedback that I get and updates that I get regularly from Tanya, they're not short, they're long emails with a lot of information. I don't think I've had the chance to even go through it all in this past year. There's just that much information. Every time I read through it, there's more and there's newer stuff to be picked up on. So take the time to go to the site. It is extremely informative. You'll probably end up having more questions than answers once you've read it. But that's what it's for. It's there for us to be able to get more questions, because I'm also a resident, and just like Sydney and I, we live. And so in Côte Saint-Luc, so we are affected by a lot of the changes. Sydney's very much affected by this change. He's right around the corner. I would be affected by the Westminster corridor. So there's a lot of changes that affect all of us, and they're not always fun changes, but change is not always easy. But we have to not just think about ourselves. We have our kids, our grandkids that are growing up here, hopefully, and we want them to stay in Côte Saint-Luc because we like it here. So in order to keep them here, we got to think ahead. We're building a vision as a group for the future. It's not for tomorrow. It's not just for right now, what we need ourselves. I'll let Daryl finish off with the last few questions and thank everyone again.
This is a follow-up question to the one about the zoning for religious institutions at that location.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think there's concern that because it truly is an important local service that needs to be close. The folks are concerned what happens if it wasn't there for whatever reason. Now, we are saying it's our vision that it should be there, but ultimately, it's, as you said, it's up to the congregation and the owner of the property to come to terms on the space. But I just want to confirm that that's all it is. For us, it's a vision, but like you said, the city can't force it. Is that, just to be clear, that's what you said?
Well, I think there's multiple questions in the questions. This is where being a trained librarian to get to the heart of what the concern is. So first of all, as renters now, in theory, the tenant, as tenants, the landlord could technically say, after your lease, buy, right? So whether there's redevelopment or not, that's one thing. The second, but I just don't see it, because then why would they rent it in the first place? The second thing is that if, for example, we have the zoning here and this particular developer says, no more synagogues. We also added in all three mall redevelopments institutional use. If that doesn't work, then there's also the PPC-moi bylaw that allows, you know, people to present projects to council and go through a whole separate process to get potential religious institutions that way. So, you know, they're not fail safes in the sense that, you know, we put the réglementation in place. We can't force things, but there are options.
Well, thank you to everyone who took some time out this evening to join us. It's almost 8 o'clock, so I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.